All right,
well, good. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to introduce you real quick, just saying welcome to the Doctor's Clinic Call, where the world is your waiting room, and we have the Sisel's own Doc Fizz in the house, and he is just an amazing chiropractor, and he knows a plethora of information, and he loves science, and we are just really blessed to have him on the Sisel team and the Sisel family. And so without further ado, Doc Fizz.
Well, thanks, Ms. Helen. I appreciate it. And, you know, and normally DW and I are doing the call together. DW had some life things to get done today, and so I'm here by myself. Last week, DW did the call. And, you know, that's the cool thing about working with a team. DW and I, we work together. We've been doing this call now for over 2 years. And every week, every Tuesday, we come to you at the same time to bring you information. Today, actually last night, I was sitting here and I was trying to think, what am I going to talk about on the call? What am I going to bring up? And I thought, you know, I'm going to talk about the benefits of a nicotinamide riboside, which is the active ingredient in the age pill, or one of the active ingredients in the age pill. Yesterday morning, I was reading a study from Harvard, and they stated that if you're taking NAD precursors, NR, nicotinamide riboside, that it will do some things for autoimmune disorders. And you know, and I've heard some people making testimonials, making claims of that, and so I wanted to see the research on it, and so I went looking, digging around, and that's where I found it. And I shared it on Facebook, and I've seen a lot of people that have been sharing that information that I passed on. But, you know, DW and I have talked about autoimmune disorders in the past, and I'm just going to briefly cover that. I'm not going to get into it in detail. But what is an autoimmune disorder? Well, an autoimmune disorder is really when your immune system decides that something normal inside your body, like maybe a protein in your knee cartilage, for example, something in your immune system triggers your immune system to say, hey, that protein isn't normal. And it sends immune cells down there to that area to attack the particular protein. And it can cause things like rheumatoid arthritis. It might send abnormal immune cells up to the brain, and it can cause autoimmune neurological disorders like MS. It might send immune cells to the lungs and cause things like asthma. And the list goes on and on and on. And I'm not going to get into a lot of the triggers that trigger the immune system to go haywire. You can go back to previous calls with the Sisel DoctorClinic.com, and you can see that. It's Sisel Doctor Clinic. It's all spelled out, no S in the doctor, and you can look that up. But once it's triggered it, then your body starts to attack, and it can damage the cells to what we've thought was irreparable. And I've told people in the past, you can remove the trigger. Let's say, for example, that maybe gluten's the trigger, or maybe casein and dairy products the trigger, and you remove the trigger, and it'll stop the active inflammation, but the damage is already there. Well, now Harvard Medical says that NAD plus, which is the form of energy that your body needs, formed from nicotinamide riboside, it actually will take and kind of, I'm gonna say, tell the immune system that, hey, that's normal, and we shouldn't be attacking it. So it's going to balance that immune system out. But what they also found is that after it's balanced out the immune system, the body has the ability, by taking this NAD and NR and actually triggers the immune system to start protecting the cells that it was actually attacking previously. So think about that. Not only does it stop attacking, but it begins to protect the actual cells that it was damaging. And then further supplementation shows that the body will actually start to repair the damaged cells. Well, think about that with autoimmune disorders, rheumatoid arthritis, right? What about multiple sclerosis? And I just think about the possibilities of that, and there's no long-term studies for me to go look at. I was just on the internet for the last 3 hours, just going through study after study after study, because I want to know what are the long-term benefits, what are the benefits with somebody with an autoimmune disorder taking nicotinamide riboside for long term, as far as the the autoimmune disorders, and there aren't any out there. But if Harvard is saying that it can protect against this, then and actually start to repair it, what does that mean? Is that we've got a lot of people that we can help, and that's really what I want to say. The next thing that I want to talk about is that I've had a lot of people ask me, well, if you look up niacin, right, which is a form of B3, nicotinamide riboside is a form of niacin, vitamin B3, and they said that there's studies out there that say there's toxicity associated with niacin. And so I wanted to make sure that everyone on the call, everybody that's listening to this recording, everybody that's involved with the age pill understands some of the safety factors involved with it. So I was digging around with it, and I was reading a 2013 Albert Einstein College of Medicine study, and they said nicotinamide riboside that it has properties that are insulin sensitizing, right? Which, as we look at metabolic syndrome, as we look at people who develop type 2 diabetes, it's an insulin sensitivity problem. The cells aren't responding to insulin anymore, and so what does that mean? What's an easy way for you to explain it? And this is the one thing that I always try to do in my clinic, and I try and do it on this call, is I want to explain it in a way that you can understand it and you can explain it to other people, because most of you aren't scientists. And so think of it like a couple that have been together forever, a married couple that have been married for 50 or 60 years. I just had the pleasure of hanging with my mom and dad for the last 2 weeks. I took them on a 7,000-mile trip in less than 2 weeks, so I got to spend a lot of one-on-one time with them in a van as we cruised around America. And I got to see, what does a couple do that have been married for 60 years, like my mom and dad. And the one thing that happens is that there's kind of a communication breakdown. They assume that the other person knows what they're thinking because they've been, together for 60 years, and that's what happens in your body, is that you take in so much sugar which causes the pancreas to produce so much insulin that eventually the cells quit communicating and they quit talking between them. And especially not just cells, but inside the cell itself, the part of the cell called the nucleus, right, which is the brain of the cell, quits communicating with the mitochondria, which is the energy-producing part of the cell. So think about that. The nucleus, the brain of the cell, isn't communicating with the energy-producing part of the cell anymore. That communication has broken down. So what Albert Einstein College of Medicine says is it reestablishes this communication. It repairs the phone line. It repairs the way that the cell can communicate. And so not only does it improve insulin sensitivity, but it starts to protect the cells, and it starts to have a neuroprotective effect on brain cells. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more. But it also starts to resist and repair the negative effects of having a high-fat diet. And living here in the States, I can say that we have a diet problem. I mean, a couple of years ago when they started talking about bringing on, fixing our healthcare system, I knew that they weren't going to get it right because they aren't addressing the first problem, which is we don't eat right. We have a food problem. And so I really liked reading this information from Albert Einstein College of Medicine. And then I started reading about, when was nicotinamide riboside actually discovered? And it was way back in 1944. 1944. So think about that, folks. I mean, that's what is that, 70 years ago? And so they've had a lot of time to study it and to figure it out. And so when I'm reading about the safety of nicotinamide riboside, NR, how much is actually safe? And so they did studies where they took and they gave people 100 milligrams per kilogram. So that's 100 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Then they gave 200 milligrams per kilogram and 300 milligrams per kilogram and 500. And then they jumped it up to 1,000. And then they went up to 3,000. And they found that all the way up to 5,000 milligrams per kilogram, there was, and they didn't test beyond that, but at 5,000 milligrams per kilogram, they found per day, they found that there was no mortality issues, none, right? And so what does that mean for you and me? I mean, when you start thinking, again, milligram per kilogram, what the heck is that? Some people don't even know what a kilogram is. And so let me put it into terms that you can understand. 300 milligrams per kilogram, right, just 300 milligrams per kilogram in a 150-pound person is equivalent to taking 20,400 milligrams per day. 20,400 milligrams per day is the equivalent of 300 milligrams per kilogram in a 150-pound person. Well, 1,000 milligrams is a quarter teaspoon, right? So you would have to take a lot to equivalent of 20,000 milligrams per day. So is it safe to take? Yeah. Could you overdose on it? Sure. Will anybody in their right mind take 20,000 milligrams per day? I mean, even with guys having the thought that if a little is good, a lot's better, I mean, we're not going to take 20,000 milligrams per day. And so that's the safety factor involved with it. Could you have some, minor side effects? Yeah, we're seeing some people that are having some nice and flushing and things like that. But that's not a safety factor. That's just a side effect of taking vitamin B3, and nicotinamide riboside is a form of B3, and so that's what I've read. There's a lot of research that has been done by Nobel laureate scientists involving nicotinamide riboside supplementation, and every single conclusion is positive. That 6 Nobel scientists have said that it's safe to take, and not only safe, but the benefits are really high. So what's happening with this? Why all of a sudden is it getting so much press? And so I started kind of looking, who's looking into this? Well, I mean, Sisel kind of got the jump on it. We got the jump on it. And I know Tom was trying to do that because we want to get this information. We want to get our product out there. And there are other products that are using nicotinamide riboside, and there's some companies that are working to develop some. Procter & Gamble, Gerald, Walmart, Costco, GNC, CVS Pharmacy, right? They're all working on this. Why? Well, there was a study that came out. It was reported in the Journal of Cell magazine, December 2013. Harvard said that nicotinamide riboside makes you smarter and look younger. Harvard Medical came out in December 2013 in the Journal of Cell, and they said that nicotinamide riboside made you smarter and look younger, right? I'm saying that because if you want to put a quote on your social media, Harvard says that nicotinamide riboside, which is the precursor for NAD, makes you look smarter and look younger. That was published in the Journal of Cell 2013. And so David Sinclair, who is a scientist down in Australia, he did an interview on 60 Minutes, and he said that that we used to put a lot of faith in resveratrol. Resveratrol, of course, being the active ingredient in grape seeds and red wine, things like that. And we used to say, get more of it. It's healthy for you. It's going to make you younger. It's going to activate the sirtuin genes, and that's the key to younger age. But he did a lot of the studies on the NR, on the nicotinamide riboside, and he said this is the new molecule for anti-aging. So GlaxoSmithKline, the big pharmaceutical giant, they teamed up with David Sinclair, and they've actually been working with the National Institute of Aging and the National Institutes of Health, and a lot of research is going to come out. But because of that, it's made the news, and a lot of people are starting to pay a lot of attention to it. And so the mitochondria, which is the energy part of the cell, it's a real powerhouse in the brain. You need to have that function in the brain, or the brain's going to start to fall apart. And I had done a talk on the brain and neurology back on, I don't remember, probably August. If you go to SiselDoctorClinic.com, you'll be able to pull that up. But I talked about, brain function and aging. And they found that nicotinamide riboside really is protective to the brain, works a lot like CoQ10 and PQQ, which are a couple of molecules. But these are things that as I'm reading and I'm studying these things this morning, It's just amazing, right? Alzheimer's disease is the 6th highest cause of death in America. 5 million Americans have Alzheimer's disease. And so a study was done on what does nicotinamide riboside do with Alzheimer's disease. And so they found that with a 3-month study that it improves cognition, and it helps to slow the progression of the disease. Again, this is a 3-month study that was done. They found that nicotinamide riboside improved cognition, and it decreased the progression of the disease. Another study, separate study, totally different group of scientists, said that nicotinamide riboside delays the death of brain cells, right? If you could delay the death of any of your brain cells, wouldn't you want to do that? I mean, I know some people who are brain dead, there's no hope for them, but for the rest of us, I mean, we really have to look at that. And again, 20,000 milligrams per day to have any issues at all, and close to 10 times that amount, and they still didn't find any issues with mortality caused from nicotinamide riboside, right? So you're talking 200,000 milligrams per day for a 150-pound person. I mean, come on. And so, of course, there's going to be those people that are going to say to me, they're going to say to you, they're going to say, well, Kurt, can't I just get this from my food? Well, the answer is yes. You want to be honest with people. You want to say, yes, you sure could. You get it from milk, whole milk. You get it from whey protein, and you get it from brewer's yeast, right? Well, beer, you get it from beer. But how much would you have to consume per day to actually get the benefits? Well, as we know, there's side effects to all of those things, and you just can't get enough, so supplementation is the only answer. So right now they're doing some studies. They're doing some what they call future studies. They're finding out what will nicotinamide riboside do for cholesterol? What will it do for obesity? What will it do for diabetes, right? And we've already kind of seen some studies on all of those. But one of the interesting studies that I was reading about this morning is they said, what will nicotinamide riboside do for chemo-induced neuropathy, right? And as a doctor, that's important to me because I've seen that. I've had people that have asked me, well, what can we do about this neuropathy? The numbness, that tingling, that pain in the lower extremities, in the legs, after they've been on a bunch of chemo. And now, after reading up that they're doing studies on this, you have to think to yourself, these scientists, they're not going to say, hey, we're doing a study on this, unless they have reason to believe that there's going to be some positive outcome, right? So they're doing a study on chemo-induced neuropathy, right? Can we say that there's a positive outcome? No, the study's not done. But again, I like to read science and studies, and I start thinking that if they're doing a study on it, they must suspect that there's going to be a positive outcome, right? And so I would get this to the people that that have chemo-induced neuropathy and just say, hey, the studies are going on right now. I can't give you the benefits from it, but I can just tell you that, hey, here it is. So some of the research or some of the researchers, they were so interested in what this will do that, and there's a lot of information coming out of Iowa. There's some really good medical researchers down in Iowa at the University of Iowa. So one researcher, he started taking a gram a day. That's a gram a day of nicotinamide riboside, and then they started measuring how much NAD does it actually produce in the body if you're taking 1,000 milligrams per day. They found that it increased his NAD levels in his blood by 2.7 times. Not 2.7%. It increased it by 2.7 times the amount that was been found in his blood prior to taking the nicotinamide riboside. They were measuring an AAD, which is another form of nicotinamide, and they found that it increased it by 45 times. And I just was like, holy cow, right? There's a lot of information out there, and I'm looking at the time and trying to be sensitive to everybody's time on the call here. And I just jotted down a bunch of notes, and I'm going to kind of go through them. So they found that nicotinamide riboside, it increases metabolism. So it increases NAD levels, which increase energy, which makes it so that you burn fat and sugar. They found that you're going to burn fat not only because of the enzymes, but they found that the energy expenditure, your body burning it faster, so it's going to burn fat. And we've seen people already making comments on Facebook and making testimonials that, holy cow, I started taking the age pill and I'm losing weight. Well, here's why. Here's some studies that back it up. The other thing is that it reprograms dysfunctional cells. Remember I was talking earlier about that communication. Well, I mean, if you could get couples who had been together for a long time to go to marriage counselors and learn how to communicate with each other, they're going to have a stronger relationship. Well, isn't that the same thing in your cells? Isn't your cell going to work better if you can improve the communication by reprogramming the dysfunctional cells? And then what it does is it causes some things to happen within the proteins, and it causes some synthesis of new proteins which rejuvenate stem cells. And we've heard Tom Sr. talking about this, that it rejuvenates stem cells. The other thing that nicotinamide riboside does is it protects the mitochondria, and it supplements not only the nuclear part of the cell, which is again the brain of the cell, but it stimulates the mitochondria, which is the energy part of the cell, and so it actually increases the activity of the sirtuin-1 genes in the nucleus, right? And if anybody's listened to some of Tom's talks on Eternity, which is our resveratrol product, he talks about resveratrol in the dosages that we see in Eternity stimulate the sirtuin-1 genes, which is the gene found in the cell of the nucleus. But they also found that nicotinamide riboside increases the sirtuin-3 genes or parts of the cell, the genes in the mitochondria, right? So you're improving within the brain of the cell and now within the energy production part of the cell. And so really great information. And then I was reading another study that said that some people have a genetic disorder that causes the genes to not be able to metabolize nicotinamide riboside as favorably as as a lot of people, and so they need to actually take more. So where Tom Senior is telling us to take 6 in the morning, 6 at night to kind of kickstart our system, there might be some people out there who need to be on that high of a dosage for the rest of their life, maybe more. And so they can have their genetics tested, and they can find this out. The particular genes, if you want to write this down, is the RS1319501 NAMPT gene, right? That's the SNP. And then the other one is the RS9770242 NAMPT SNP. And you can have these read through a genetic test. I use a company called Smart DNA to do it, but there's other companies like 23andMe, and then you have to have somebody read it for you. But so there's some things there. But the other thing that I'm starting to see is that people are making testimonials that they're sleeping better. They go to bed and they have better night's rest, and they're going into this REM sleep. And so nicotinamide riboside supports a healthy circadian rhythm, right? A friend of mine, I was just reading that Jesse was posting, he was in a sleep study, and his sleep pattern was all messed up, and here's a perfect candidate for taking the age pill, right? Again, we can't say cure, we can't say treat, but based on the studies that are out there, right, it's showing that. And then not only does it activate the sirtuin genes, but it helps with what's called the PARPS, right, which is genes that cause repair of the DNA. It actually repairs the DNA. The CD38 receptor involved with glucose-induced insulin secretion, right? So it's going to help with insulin, and it helps with helping restore muscle mass. When you start to hear that, you're going, wow, who wouldn't want that? I was just at a anti-aging conference, not just at, I guess it was a while back, it was back in April, and they were talking about this. They were saying that if you want to have healthy aging, you have to keep your muscle mass. You don't want to just keep your muscles toned, but you want to actually maintain your muscle mass throughout your life. And Tom Senior, not that long ago, within the last 2 months, was talking about how we start to lose muscle mass as we age, and he gave the percentages. I don't remember all of that, but what if you could restore that? And then we start talking about mitochondrial myelopathy. It's a disease where the mitochondria, the energy producing part of the muscle cells, are damaged. So the energy producing part of the muscle cells are actually damaged, and what they found is that by taking nicotinamide riboside, it delays the myelopathy progression and helping with the mitochondrial abnormalities, and it reduces the NAD consumption by these cells, so it protects against mitochondrial disease. Then I started looking at what does it do with tumor growth, and I'm gonna say this before I talk about it, that my suggestion to people who are undergoing active chemo and active radiation, that I've told them not to take the age pill while they're undergoing the active treatment, because it might actually cause the cell not to be, killed by the treatment. So it might negate the treatment. And holy cow, if you know anybody that's gone through chemo or radiation, you don't want them to have to undergo that again and again and again. So I tell people if they're undergoing active treatment, not to be on the product. But if you're using the nicotinamide riboside, which is the age pill, it'll limit tumor growth. And they found this in mice with high levels of oxidative stress. So it repairs the DNA damage, and it protects against DNA damage, and it can slow tumor progression, right? And so I thought, that's pretty cool. Again, I'm going to make the claim right here. We can't say cure, we can't say treat, any of those things. We can't suggest that this is in any way any kind of a medical treatment. But the studies are showing us these things, and everything that I'm reading, everything that I'm telling you right now is I've gotten out of studies that I read in the 3 hours preceding the call. And so nicotinamide riboside in diabetic mice, it made it so that it increased glucose tolerance, it decreased weight gain, it decreased liver damage, right, in diabetic mice. And type 2 diabetes, it decreases the blood glucose and protects against diabetic neuropathy, right? Again, we were talking about chemo-induced neuropathy. Now I'm talking about diabetic neuropathy. And so it protects against that. These are the studies. These aren't me making claims. I'm reading these from studies that I read. I mean, I sat here for 3 hours and I read on this. When we're talking about Alzheimer's disease, I mean, just it protects against the part of the nerve that gets damaged, the axon. It protects against degeneration of these axons, and it prevents degeneration of the brain. Again, these are people in studies who are taking the nicotinamide riboside for over 3 months. So you're not going to give it to somebody today and then they're going to wake up tomorrow and go, holy cow, I'm back. No, it's not going to be like that. You're talking over 3 months, right? And maybe longer than that. I mean, we just you don't know. I mean, and things like that. So it oral doses of nicotinamide riboside protects the liver. It prevents or stops fat accumulation. It decreases oxidative stress in the liver, right? And we're exposed to toxins every single day, and so wouldn't you want your liver to be healthier, right? Another study that I read said that it prevents hearing loss. People who have damage to their hearing because of loud noises, noise exposure, they found that nicotinamide riboside prevents against hearing loss, and it protects against nerve degeneration. Again, I'm reading the sirtuin-3 gene, right? And so I'm just amazed at all the amounts of information that are out there. I'm looking at some things here, trying to figure out how to kind of close this out, and they said that NAD levels decrease with age and significantly start to decrease between the ages of 40 and 60 by as much as half. That was from a study of University of South Wales back in 2015. I mean, there's studies here that I'm reading from Dartmouth University. They're saying that if you want to bump up your NAD levels, take nicotinamide riboside. Dartmouth University. Evidence of NAD and caloric restriction could expand lifespan. University of Iowa, 2008. Evidence of NAD and caloric restriction could extend your lifespan. That's a study that came out University of Iowa back in 2008. That's almost 10 years ago. I mean, in a couple months, that'll be a 10-year-old study. And the University of South Wales, did the study on the NAD levels decreasing by half between the ages of 40 and 60. University of South Wales back in 2015, 2 years ago, and every cell in your body has NAD. You need NAD to function, and And so if you don't have enough of it, your cells are going to start to have problems, and that's that. And so who needs the NAD? Well, based on the things that I've just told you, I mean, my conclusion is every single one of us, right? Every single one of us. If somebody says, oh, I don't need that, then you have to kind of look at them a little cross-eyed and say, what, are you not a human being? Are you not a mammal? Because you do need it, and have them listen to this call, and they can see that, you know, it affects every single one of us. And some people might ask you, well, you know, why do we all of a sudden need it now? Well, it's not all of a sudden that we need it now. It didn't come on all of a sudden. All of a sudden, as you walk on the street and a truck runs you over, that's all of a sudden. Most everything else occurs over time. You know, you gradually degenerate. We gradually went from having good diets to poor diets. We gradually depleted the soil of all the necessary minerals, and farming practices don't add that back in. So we gradually did that. It's not all of a sudden we need this. It's just that, you know, they found it in 1944, and 70 years later they realized how important it is. So that's the information for today, everyone. Thanks for being on the call. For those of you listening to the recording, I hope you got some information out of it. And I know I went over by a few minutes, but, you know, I think it was great information. If I would have read everything that I wrote down, we'd be here for another 2 days. Have a great day. Enjoy your Tuesday. Bye-bye.